in Addis Ababa for the newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, we're joined now from Addis Ababa by Mohammed Adamo. He's an Oromo journalist and editor of the online magazine opride.com. We have Awal Alo, who's a lecturer in law at Keele University in the UK. And in Washington, D.C. is journalist and activist Abebe Gello. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Mohammed, let me start with you. Abe Mania, as they call it, is there more hope or is there more hype? Where do you stand?
I think this country has never been more hopeful. I think there is a great deal of hope and optimism, and people are jealously guarding this moment against those who want to maintain the status quo. I think Abiy Mania is an understatement because the Prime Minister has ushered in reforms at a speed this country has never seen, from the release of prisoners to the review of some of the repressive laws, rapprochement with Eritrea. There's a laundry list of changes that he has introduced, and generally there's a feeling in this country that there is no more better qualified to lead this country through this transition.
Abebe, let me understand and help me understand how symbolically significant it was when we had the Oromo Liberation Front not being treated as terrorists anymore and the leaders returning to the capital with their flag. Tell me what that meant.
It means a lot because the Oromo People's Liberation Front, OLF, was labeled as a terrorist organization, as he pointed out, by the previous TPLF-dominated regime. The country has taken a reform to a higher level, under the leadership of Abiy Ahmed. And it's not only the return of the OLF, which is significant. The return of the patriotic Gimbo Sabat leadership is also a momentous event in Ethiopian political history, especially after Abiy Ahmed has been elected. The reform is going well, and I believe that taking this kind of measure will pave the way for a better future for Ethiopia.
Abebe, at the first sign of trouble, when there were clashes, the first spasm of trouble, if you like, we saw that the state blocked mobile internet, more than 1,000 people were arrested. So for many, they've seen this movie before. Does that suggest that reform's going to take a long time, because ultimately the state still reflexively responds in the way it has over the past couple decades?
That's actually true in the sense that, this reform will not be easy. There will be obstacles on the way. But generally speaking, the steps that have been taken by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed will pave the way for a greater reform. That's my opinion. But as you pointed out, there are also problems here and there. There are ethnic clashes. One of the obstacles for the reform agenda of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is ethnic politics. Ethnic politics has been intensified for various reasons. The return of the OLF has also amplified that, because it's basically an ethnic-based group.
Right.
But if the reform continues unabated, I believe that the Prime Minister will be able to steer the way towards a better future.
So, we have Abiy saying, I'm not a king. My ultimate objective is to see democratic elections in Ethiopia. If that happened, I'll feel I fulfilled my objective. Do you believe him, Awal?
I certainly do. I think he's very genuine, he's very determined when he says those things. And I have been watching the Ethiopian political scene for the last 5-6 years, and I don't think I have ever seen any individual, both within the ruling coalition and within the opposition, who have the political capital, the cultural appeal, and as well as the dynamism and organizational competence that can kind of steer this country out of this troubled water. So I certainly believe him, yes.
Mohammed Ademo, we heard from Abebe that ethnic politics have been amplified recently. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think the return of Gimbo 7 in OLF means that there are groups that has divergent aspiration, divergent political persuasions coming to the country. They bring their political perspective, and this whole ethnicized conflict started when Gimbo 7 returned in the country was literally awash with a flag that was outlawed under the previous government. And when OLF came, the Oromo activists who support the OLF wanted to put up their flags, and some of the Gimbo 7 supporters, alleged supporters, wanted to prevent that, and that sort of led to a standoff, and it was mishandled. But I think this is a multinational federation, and ethnicity has always been around, and the country is organized along ethnic lines. It's not a perfect system, but I think it needs to be tested. This idea that the return of OLF somehow led to intensification of ethnic politics is, I think, a little bit inaccurate. We need to manage it. I think we need to find a way to balance between opening up, but also making sure that people respect the law of the land, and there are symbols and narratives that we don't agree on. I think we need civic conversations around those issues so that we can settle, we can agree on a flag for this nation, for example, and many other issues that we need to talk about. But I think the fear of ethnicity just shows that maybe a political predisposition of certain groups and certain individuals who see ethnicity as the boogeyman, whereas this is a country emerging from authoritarianism, and people feel free, and it's almost as if the frustrations and the anger, their aspirations has been bottled up, and now you open it up, and that is leading to instances of people taking the law onto their hands and being a bit territorial here and there.
Abebe, has the man just given a strong rebuttal of your point?
I don't think so, because ethnic politics has been a major problem in Ethiopia for the last 27 years. Because the TPLF wanted, to put in place a divide and rule strategy to rule Ethiopia. As a result of that, we have ethnic federation and a constitution based on ethnicity. Ethnicity, as you know, is one of the main sources of conflict around the world. There are no longer many conflicts between countries, but conflicts among ethnic groups has destabilized so many countries. And it led to, the disintegration of countries like the former Yugoslavia, and it led to genocide in Rwanda. So Ethiopia will face a major problem from ethnic politics. There is no doubt about that. Because as long as people are organized for political objectives around ethnicity, there will be conflict of interests.
Right.
These conflicting interests will definitely lead to destabilization of the country.
But given
if
that
I give you an example, for instance, from
go ahead.
January to June this year, around 1.4 million people have been displaced in Ethiopia, topping Syria and the Congo Democratic Republic. So this is not because of a peaceful transition along ethnic line, but because of ethnic conflicts.
Right.
So if ethnicity is not addressed in Ethiopia, it will continue to be a major problem, and it will undermine the reform agenda of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed.
Okay, so Abebe, isn't it interesting, though, that this man, as the Prime Minister, with his mixed background, is able to absorb a lot of this because his father was Muslim and I think mother was Orthodox, and he's a Protestant right now, and he's an Oromo and so forth. So he ticks a lot of boxes for enough people to trust him. Isn't that the whole point? What you're saying is that you have hypothetical fears that Ethiopia might return back to old grievances, but isn't this the right man to take you forward?
I don't have any doubt that Abiy Ahmed is the right man to take Ethiopia forward. As you pointed out, he has a very interesting background, mixed background, Christian Oromo, Muslim background, which is very interesting in Ethiopia. This mixed background is an asset for him. But at the same time, Ethiopia has 80 ethnic groups, around 80 ethnic groups with their own political groups and conflicting aspirations and interests. So this will be a major obstacle. That's why I said ethnicity will be a major obstacle for the Prime Minister, despite his background, despite the fact that he wants to unify the country and take it forward.
And let me go to Awal Alo as we look at the big picture here. The man's been in office
if I may.
Okay, come in, Mohammed. So, Awal, my apologies. I'm going to come to you in a minute, but Mohammed wants to jump in. Mohammed?
I just want to make sure that, I used to sit where Ababa is sitting right now, and the reality of the matter on this side is the Prime Minister is on the record, and several law enforcement officials have been on the record saying that there are groups who want to exploit ethnic differences, ethnic fault lines in this country. You can look at the problems that we've seen in between the Somali and Oromo communities along the eastern border. The conflict that Ababa was mentioning between the Guji Oromo and the Gedio in a few other episodes of ethnic unrest. Those things are those instances are at least based on the official information, including from the Prime Minister, which Abebe says that is the right man to lead this country. These are being instigated by the old guard and elements within the deep state who wants to return to the status quo. I think we need to look at the facts, and I'm not suggesting that there is no ethnic dimension to these conflicts, but there are groups who are exploiting those fault lines, and I think we need to look at that and have a conversation, serious conversation about how do we move from here forward into democracy, but also find an arrangement that works for everyone, not necessarily my perspective or the perspective of Ababe and the Gimbot 7 or some other groups who wants to return to sort of a more unitary form of government. And I think this is a very diverse nation, and ethnic federalism or the multinational federalism celebrates those pluralism and those diversity. I think we need to embrace that. We need to find a balance where we celebrate our diversity without necessarily building boundaries and need to re-educate our people. Ababe is right in saying that the previous government has used a divide and rule strategy to try to tell people this is your piece of the land and nobody else belongs here other than yourself. We need to re-educate people. I don't think the problem fundamentally is of the structure, but it's the way it has been instrumentalized and the way it has been abused, and the fact that it has never been implemented, and the fact that those same groups are now trying to exploit the same fault lines for their political benefits.
Now, unfortunately, we've lost Awal Alo at Keele University due to a technical issue. That's really unfortunate. But let me go back to you, Abebe. Mohammed said, I used to be in your position, Abebe, and I remember as well talking to Mohammed when he was coming out of DC, being critical of the government. He was critical of a different administration. He was critical of Haile Mariam Desalegn, and we used to have these statements from the Ethiopian embassy in the UK. That was kind of the best we could ever get from the Ethiopian government back then, a couple of years ago. And Mohammed was on the other side of the fence, being highly critical of the government. It reminds me of the diaspora. Let me ask you, Abebe, what will it take for Ethiopians in the diaspora to go back home and to have enough trust in Abiy Ahmed and enough trust in the future to leave their lives, their jobs, and whatever they're doing, whether it's in DC or the UK, and say, we want to give it a shot back home?
Thank you again. The Ethiopian diaspora has embraced Dr. Abiy Ahmed, since he came power. People have given him endorsement. Well-known activists and dissidents have praised his leadership. And in fact, the man has been incredible. He's bold in taking actions. He has transformed the political landscape, there is no doubt about that. But at the same time, the system has not changed. Even if there is a change of leadership, the system remains intact. The TPLF has still got presence, significant presence in the current system. And they are trying to undermine this Prime Minister in many, many ways. Mohammed mentioned what is also happening, especially in terms of instigating ethnic violence in many parts of the country, and people still believe that the TPLF is behind it. So the TPLF wants to return to the past, to restore the status quo. As long as this internal power struggle is going on, I don't think that people will have patience and trust for so long. So, significant steps must be taken to purge those elements within the system that undermine not only the Prime Minister, but the progress that the country is making. If the situation stabilizes, I'm sure so many people can return home and contribute their share, for the progress of the country, including myself. I have been in exile for the last 20 years, and I would like to return to my country. It's my country. I would like to contribute whatever I can for the transformation of Ethiopia, which has suffered a lot under succeeding regimes and tyrants. So it all depends on how this reform plays out in the near future.
Okay, so Mohammed, Abebe wants to return home, but he's being cautious because he fears the deep state and he fears those who are trying to undo and unravel all the good work that Abiy has envisaged and has already done. Is that a fair point? Is the man being reasonable?
No, I think anyone, including Abebe, is welcome to come here. And as you pointed out in the lead up to the question, I was very critical of the government, as critical of the government as Abebe have been, and I'm here. I feel free. I feel at home. I'm trying to do my best to support this administration. I'm trying to talk to people and try to bring about understanding between different groups and different communities. The media here lacks capacity. I'm working with different groups and trying to help professionalize the media, trying to bring people from abroad who are also interested in being part of this change. I think at this point, yes, there are problems. Yes, the TPLF and it is intelligence apparatus, it is security interests are around, and they very much wants to pull us back. But the last time I was on this program, I pointed out that there are two centers of power. That's the power of the people and the power of those that have the guns, or the deep state as we call it. I think Abiy has done a very good job of consolidating the popular support that he has generated. That cuts across all kinds of political divides. For that reason alone, I think people are, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, protective of the Prime Minister. You talk to Ethiopians in Addis Ababa, their primary concern is the security of the Prime Minister, and because they know that there are groups that would, if they can, like to harm him. But all that said, I think anyone can come and you will not be stopped at the airport. You can do whatever you want here, set up shop. Abebe's network has opened an office here. I don't see why Abebe doesn't have the confidence to come here when people who lead the organization that have been categorized as terrorist organizations are here and organizing and talking to people. So I think the diaspora should come. This is a great time to come and help Ethiopia move forward.
Okay, well, Abebe is giving it some time. We're all giving him some time, and everybody's watching Ethiopia. It's a tremendous time for the country right now. Next time on the Newsmakers, we'll take a high definition, higher resolution look at the thaw between Ethiopia and Eritrea. But for the moment, gentlemen, I have to move on. I thank you for joining us on the Newsmakers, Mohammed Ademo, Abebe Gallo, and also, unfortunately, we lost his window, Awal Allo. Thanks again, gentlemen.